I'm still waiting to get more details on this, but a short time ago, CNN had a reporter on the air who was claiming that the sources inside of the State Department came out and briefed reporters that they had some indication that Russia was either aware of this before it happened or as it was happening. And I don't know if the allegation is they did nothing to stop it. I don't know. We're trying to get more details on that, but stand by because that is a developing story. We're joined right now by Peter Brookes, who's a senior fellow for national security affairs for the Heritage Foundation. Peter, how are you?
Good.
Let me ask your initial reaction to what you heard from Nikki Haley there a minute ago, and this decision to drop 59 bombs on Syria.
It was a good call.
Yeah.
And a significant change from what we saw in the Obama administration, which I think was, a bit too weak, especially in terms of this sort of horrific use of chemical weapons against innocent civilians. I think President Obama made a huge mistake 4 years ago on this issue. We saw the use of chemical weapons after that. I believe it was more chlorine gas, which is still horrible, but not as horrible on the scale of being terribly horrible of sarin gas, which is a nerve agent. So I think the president did the right thing. It was basically a surgical strike. It was proportionate. It was limited. And we'll have to see what happens now, if this is enough to deter Bashar al-Assad from using these horrible weapons again against his own people.
Yeah, in the end, I guess it still doesn't do anything to tip the scales of this civil war one direction or another. Right?
No, it's very, like I said, it's very limited. One particular problem, the effort to degrade Bashar al-Assad's ability to deliver these weapons again. It does not eliminate it. There's other airfields. They didn't go after any production facilities, which is always problematic because you don't really want to bomb a nerve agent facility because you'd spread the nerve agent, right? So this was very focused, and it does not, in my view, have an effect on the ultimate outcome of the situation in Syria.
We're talking to Peter Brookes from the Heritage Foundation. This has been going on long enough that here's what I think happens in America. Maybe you'll disagree with me, but I think after a while, people, it's kind of background noise. They hear about something in Syria occasionally, but they've kind of forgotten what the key issues were there. If you don't mind just doing a little bit of teaching for a moment for my audience, I heard Marco Rubio this morning describe what's going on in Syria like a cage match. He said you've got multiple characters fighting each other. Sometimes they team up against somebody else, and it's kind of hard to determine who the good guys are.
Well, it's very complex. So let me break it down real quickly for you. Syria is involved in a civil war for 6 years now, going back to the Arab Spring. The major players are the government in Damascus under President Bashar al-Assad. They are aligned with Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah against an array of forces. That includes ISIS, Al-Qaeda, other Islamist militant groups, other militant groups, some that are rebel groups that are perhaps more liberal in their views in terms of democracy and free elections. The Turks are there. The Kurds are there. The United States is there. There are Arab forces there as well. There's airplanes, Russian aircraft, American aircraft, other anti-ISIS coalition aircraft. I mean, you can't do this in just a 10-minute segment.
No.
But it's an incredibly complex situation in terms of trying to find any sort of political solution to what has been going on. The other thing that's important for people to know is that probably 500,000 people have perished, and it's the world's largest refugee crisis.
Wow. Let me pick your brain on one last thing. CNN and Fox are reporting, Jennifer Griffin reported this morning on Fox, that a Russian warship is now headed into the Gulf, close to where the two U.S. ships were who fired these missiles. And, of course, you heard Nikki Haley's comments toward Russia at the UN, and CNN reported earlier that the State Department is claiming that it's possible Russia was aware of what was going on with these chemical weapons. Does this draw us deeper into conflict with Vladimir Putin, if that's possible?
Not necessarily. look, the Russians, have to do something, right? They've got an international audience, just like this strike had an international audience, and this strike had a domestic audience for the United States, right? The same thing with the Russians. They've broken off the deconfliction agreement with U.S. aircraft for the moment. Hopefully they'll come back to that. They've protested it at the United Nations, not surprisingly. They've said things domestically. They've moved a warship. It doesn't mean that we're at DEFCON, a high DEFCON level here. But the relations with Russia are getting worse. I've written about in my Boston Herald column the fact that Russia's violated arms control treaties. They're supporting the Taliban in Afghanistan. They're getting on the wrong side of the war in Libya. There's a lot of things that were besides Ukraine and Syria and Crimea. There's a lot of things, and the relationship is, and most of these are choices, Russian choices. So next week, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is going to Moscow, and I think the meetings are going to be tense, but I think it's an opportunity for some sober, straight talk between the two sides.
Well, I hope there is, and I've had people call into my show today questioning whether or not we had adequate evidence that Syria was responsible for this. Do you believe it's there?
I do, but you and I are not in Syria, and we that's why you have to. If this was correct, I would imagine the United States must have had the intelligence that led them to believe that this was a just strike based on any number of reports and evidence and information. So I think that they felt comfortable with that, and I feel comfortable because we have seen this historic record of the Bashar al-Assad regime using this in the past, even after the 2013 agreement between the United States and Russia about removing these any chemical weapons.
Right.
So I think it sends a pretty strong signal at this point.
Very good. Peter Brookes with the Heritage Foundation. I direct people to heritage.org to read more of your thoughts on this. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep. Take care. Appreciate that. Did you start to grasp the difficulty of this situation? The multiple characters and factions that are involved here. A lot of them. He mentioned Hezbollah, Iraq, or Iran, who were fighting on the side of Syria, and then ISIS and Al Qaeda. Though all those characters hate the United States of America, despite they're trying to kill us every day.